Brett Yormark earlier in the last hour or so. This is reported by all the national writers who are there. I'm about fairness. They want the Big 12 wants the 5 auto qualifiers, the AQs, and the 11 at-large spots for 2026. Wants an end to considering multiple automatic qualifiers. One playoff proposal gives the Big Ten and the SEC 4 of them. Yormark, I'm about fairness. There's a lot of conversations about automatic qualifiers. We want to earn it on the field, and I think 5+11 format does that. It's fair. It's what our fans want. They don't want an invitational. They want a true playoff system. We have that now. We need to put these multiple AQs and take it out of conversation and focus on what's right with college football. I think 5 automatic qualifiers, conference champions, and 11 does that, and that is our preference.
So there's like so many tentacles to this right now because the SEC and Greg Sankey's putting out all this data about their strength of schedule and how they pick the teams. And then the Big Ten a lot of their leaders won't agree, say they won't agree to the 5+11 unless the SEC goes to 9 games, which then would make the ACC have to go to 9 games because then the wheel would finally spin to them because they couldn't hide behind the SEC doing it anymore. And then, of course, just the fact that 5+11 means that you're probably, a lot of years, if you're the Big 12 and ACC, going to get 1. You might have a year where you fire off and get 3. It might be a great year. But for the most part, based on the way that people judge these teams, you could only get 1. But if you think that's better for college football, and then you say, look, we're going to go earn it on the field, then you make those investments in football and see what happens down the line. It's better for the fans, and then it doesn't create an invitational. Yeah, it might hurt your league a little bit, but also you're betting on yourself, which is bold. And I think a lot of people appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody's, ready to kind of wrap this thing up and try to get to the next point of this thing. And part of it's just agreeing to this automatic qualifier part. And there's been a lot of debate and talk about it, obviously, over the last few days, and a lot of barbs thrown, especially coming out of SEC meetings. And so I think, Greg Sankey asked for others to come up with ideas, right, or to come to the table with something. Well, Brett Yormark saying, here's what I like. Boom, here we go. So here's what the Big 12 signs off on is 5+11. And I do think it's a gamble because the other alternative version does give you 2 teams, but it is more of an invitational. It does completely dilute the conference championship games, entirely. And I don't know that 5+11 doesn't do some of that as well. But with the AQs, the way they were set up in that other proposal, I don't know, man. Unless you're just a fan of the Big Ten, not even a fan of like Ohio State, but you're just like conference fan, then I think you probably like those alternative models with 4 automatically making it and then the ability to get like 6 or 7. But this is just as good for you. And it's not just automatically built in and baked into the season. And so I much prefer this, even though looking at it from a Big 12 standpoint, it is a gamble because you are not guaranteed to have any more than the single champion. And last year, you would have only had your champion in a 16-team playoff field. It would have been Arizona State, and then you would have had a group of 3 teams all at the back end at like 17, 18, and 20. You would have had BYU, and you had Iowa State, and Colorado was still hanging around there. Close enough, because if you'll remember, they almost made the Big 12 championship game. They messed all over themselves in the end of the regular season, but they were in line to get a spot in the Big 12 championship. So I like the go earn it on the field. I agree with him. At some point, when you're the Big 12 and you've been doing all this talking about this is unfair and this gap and this and this that, what I've said all along, guys, is what? To change the narrative.
Go win.
Go win.
Go beat
win
somebody. Yeah.
Playoff games. Go win big rivalry games against other conferences or big bowl games against other conferences. Go win. That's all you can do. You're not going to suddenly convince a TV network that you're better than you are and you deserve more money unless you give them a reason to believe that. And the only thing you can do to do that at this point is you're not going to just grow a big metropolis out your backside all of a sudden in like Ames, Iowa, and millions of people show up to watch your TV. You got to win. You got to bring in fans. You got to bring in eyeballs, and you do that by winning. So this is a path where winning is what matters most, and I like that. And I like that the Big 12's made their position clear, and I do prefer the 5+11, even though it's a bit of a risk because, yeah, there might be years like last year where you only get the one team in, but it does give you that in the case of maybe other years, you get 3 or 4 in.
The game-winning play right here in my hand. The spices dancing on my taste buds. The crispness is unreal. The crunch giving it away to that tender, succulent meat. The magical wood-fired flavor from the Pit Boss. It's like a celebration of barbecue in my mouth. A touchdown of taste. A championship of flavor. It's a symphony of taste and texture. Touchdown! The ultimate game day feast. Only on Pit Boss.
Rather than you're almost blocked out already because all these spots are occupied by automatic qualifiers from other leagues. So I like it.
Steele Austin, stupid move by Yormark. Take the 2 bids. It's a gift. The college football playoff is a P2 invitational by either model, any way you look at it. And some are saying, yes, go prove it. And so that's from just like in the last hour, Brett Yormark and the quote from Big 12 spring meetings going on in Orlando.
And I agree with Austin to an extent. You are, like I just said, running the risk of you have 2 for sure, but you're choosing the path where you may only have 1, and you're going to be guaranteed the 1 because of the conference champion. But, yeah, that is part of the gamble. But I would say, Austin, the part that for me at least makes me feel like this is the best path for college football moving forward is that it's the best path for college football because, yeah, it's still going to be logjam with SEC and Big Ten teams, all those other free bids that are going to be up for grabs, and you're going to have to fight the narrative there. But ultimately, it does come down to winning. And if you win enough, there's going to be, that's going to be your argument for why this second team deserves in or this third team deserves in. And then if they try to screw you over in that, well, then it gets loud, and then maybe we have some things. But that's for later on. Right now, though, you're saying make it matter for college football as a whole, not just for the Big 12. Let's not make this thing already set up before it even starts. Let's go out there and let the season play out, let teams win, and see who's standing. And I think that's best for the game.
Taylor Mott in the chat just said, "Ball, just win, correct, but much easier than done. The Big Ten and SEC out-recruit, outspend, have more resources, better players, most advertisement, etc."
Okay, I'll push back a little bit on the totally better players thing because I think that the better players thing is mostly rankings. Like
I think a lot of it's
NFL draft picks.
I think a lot of it is, NFL draft picks. I mean, you see the graphics at the end, but a lot of it's like certain positions, especially.
But I don't think look, I think the best quarterback conference in the country this year is the Big 12.
Yeah,
I think so. Like when you talk about it, I think you have to have it's year to year. And yes, the SEC, they have a lead on this. But the only way that you're going to catch up is not to give them more of one, by giving them 4 automatic qualifiers, because that is a recruiting tool that you're giving them, is that as long as we're one of the top 4 teams in this league, we're getting to the playoff. You're going to play way more meaningful games in this league than you will in those other leagues. That's another recruiting tool you're giving them because they're like, well, you're only guaranteed 2 in those other leagues. So that's another recruiting tool you're giving the SEC. And to that point, there's always going to be noise, but there will be more manageable noise if you break it down to what happened on the field and the strength of schedule any given year than basing it on automatic qualifiers, which are basing it on history, which doesn't matter in the moment of any given year. So you're going to have more years where you would have a Big Ten team or an SEC team that's outside of those top 16 get in because you've got to reach down and do it. And then you're really going to be pissed when you don't get your second team in.
All right, here's from last night, Mark Harlan from Utah, the AD, conversation at spring meetings when he said, I think the public and we agree that you have to win this thing on the field. So this was before Yormark's statement and quote and what he said earlier this afternoon about an hour ago. So there's the Utah AD with what he said. John Wilner also had this last night when they were discussing what was going to be 4-4-2-2-1. His thought was this: the question is whether the Big 12 and ACC have the chance to earn it on the field if the big boy schools won't schedule them non-conf because their own crossover series. Tough spot, but accepting 4-4-2-2-1 is an inferiority and you're formalizing that.
Yeah.
In other words, by saying that is, oh, God, please, we're going to get two. Although that does seem like it's better than what you have now, which was one.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a pickle to be in, a tough spot as he puts it, and he's right. He's just beginning to think, well, John, you need to know the system is working against them. It is absolutely working against them, and it's not going to probably change anytime soon. So it is a tough spot, but it's a much more enviable spot than that of being a team that's not in those two conferences and to being a team that's in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th best conferences that are all these dozens of teams trying to compete for maybe one spot or competing for a spot, basically. So you still got it better than half the country. But I mean, let's face it, there is different planes of conferences and teams right now. So the fact that you're still involved, I think, is a good thing. You don't need to be just happy to be there. You need to still fight for yourself. But how do you do that? Again, I think the only way that you can really do that is not by sitting there and trying to politic this out in the public or, get the governor or somebody to try to intercede. I think that Cody Campbell's way ultimately would have been maybe a way to do something along those lines, but we saw how quickly that got put to rest or put on pause. So in the meantime, I agree with Mark Harlan, and I think I said that before we showed that graphic that, yeah, you've got to go out and just win more games. And look, to the part about it's more difficult, better players on the other side and all that, I will say that there's a lot of strength of schedule pumping up by the SEC. Like, legitimately, they're handing out propaganda at their meetings today, like for real, propping up their strength of schedule to the people who probably need it the least because they're already sipping the Kool-Aid down there at those meetings anyways. But nevertheless, they're handing out propaganda about the strength of schedule. And I do think if you look at this Big Ten arrangement, if the SEC goes to 9 games and that leaves one spot, which is probably, if you don't have a rivalry game, that leaves you one spot, which is probably going to be your, who am I picking on today? Your Kennesaw State or your Wofford or whoever, then yeah, there's no room for Iowa State to play Mississippi State. There's no room for Baylor to play Auburn like they are this year, or Texas Tech to play, Florida or something most years. So you do have to be leery of that. And the fact that now they're going to use the strength of schedule argument to tell you why the 6th team needs to get in over the second Big 10 or second Big 12 team. And that is something that I'm a little bit concerned about. But I do think that rather than complaining about how unfair the system is, even though there's right to complain sometimes, and all that comes with that, I think at some point you just got to put up and shut up, and you need to go put it out on the field, and that's what the SEC's done. That's why they're in the position that they're in. That's what the Big Ten's done the last couple of years, and you are having to climb a much steeper hill, but at some point you got to go out there and put up and not talk anymore. So that's what the Big 12 is going to have to do, and the ACC as well.
All right, you mentioned propaganda. I don't have the tweet, but yeah, a lot of the national writers saying that the SEC put out a huge statistical data graphic. It was part of what Greg Sankey said yesterday evening about how they have basically all of their teams inside the top 50 when it comes to metrics, the Massey, the S&P, even they said, I'm not sure what that really is. But when you have probably right now it's 16 teams, 13 of them will most likely be ranked inside the top 40, and maybe all of them now that Vanderbilt has Pavia for another year and the year that they had. So there's that bubble effect. They are, from top to bottom, have the most of the have a deeper as far as upper level conference, but they're not. Let's not forget there is Mississippi State. South Carolina is just now making a move. Arkansas's in and out.
Remember when Kentucky was like average good for like a few years and we suddenly acted like they'd go win the Big 12 automatically?
But when they win a game, they jump in it. I get what he's saying, and some of what he actually says is true. But the metrics, top 40, top 50, yeah, the Big 12 could have teams anywhere from number 7 to 88. I don't know. It's part of the deal. But what they're doing is, okay, listen, this is what we have. This is the hand we've been dealt. We got to go freaking win. And we got to go get some of your guys that are going to help you increase your NIL, and go get better recruits, and go get better whatever you need, and try to see if you can catch them. The SEC was not rolling, Paul and Craig, in national titles. Florida won it in 1996. No, Nebraska won it in 97. Believe me, that's the last time they did. And then they
actually
went on.
Michigan won it in 97.
Oh, okay, that's it. It's
is that how it's going to be today?
no, it's good. But they weren't rolling in national titles. They were in a lot of those games, but they weren't winning. They started rolling though in the 2000s, and they haven't stopped.
Yeah,
since.
and it's 25 years later.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's whole people's lives that have already graduated college. All they've seen is that dominance. So I mean, the 90s for us seems like yesterday, but it's a non-existent thing for a lot of other people who are involved at this point. But yeah, I think the strength of schedule thing, first of all, they're passing it out to people that believe that they walk on water to begin with. Yeah. So I think you'd more of like need to push that out nationally, which I guess Twitter's doing that because people are taking pictures and showing it. But it is also a self-fulfilling prophecy when the rankings seemingly are massaged for you from time to time. And you have teams that lose and the team that beat them jumps in. So somehow you have a bad weekend and you end up with more teams ranked in the top 25 than you had going into the bad weekend. It's weird. And so there is that comes into play with the strength of schedule argument where it is a little bit self-fulfilling because, well, if your teams are constantly ranked no matter what, and there's numbers of them, then everybody's playing this on paper, very tough schedule. Maybe, looking at it from your own eyes, it doesn't appear to be as lopsided as it is on paper. But yeah, I'd lean into that argument as well because they have their fair share of the rankings, and that will all just bolster that strength of schedule argument. And then when we get to the end of the year, and it's the 5 champions who have earned it, and then it's all of these other free spots, that's going to be the number one thing that they point to is the strength of schedule. And look at how Alabama beat 5 teams that were at one point ranked in the top 25, and Iowa State only beat 3 teams, and I don't think it'll be necessarily that black and white where strength of schedule always tells the tale, but that's a tool that if you're Greg Sankey, yeah, you're going to utilize this because it very much points in your favor. And that's something you had to consider when you're Brett Yormark and the other officials and the ACC and everybody else thinking about this is, all right, how does this play out moving forward? And that's going to be a big way that they play this is the strength of schedule. And if they're scheduling you and blocking you out, that is to the point of somebody earlier, that is going to be problematic. But invest in your football program. Mm-hmm. Your donors need to step up, or it's nobody else's fault but your own, right? Mm-hmm. If you're trying and you're not getting there, that's one thing. But if you're not even trying and you're complaining about it, that's an entirely another thing. So invest, and it either pays off or it doesn't. But not investing guarantees it won't. So, yeah, it's a call to arms for some people, and I think it's a call for everybody to bring their A game. And if you don't, then it's going to be self-fulfilling just like strength of schedule.
Okay, so I need you guys maybe to help me out with this. I mean, I know this is propaganda, but he's putting all this stuff out. Well, what is it like? What is he trying to prove? We all know this.
They have gotten rabbit ears. They've gotten overly sensitive. It's like, if you're as good as you say you are, why do you have to put this out? You've let 1 year when your team, Alabama, who invented football, and they were really, really good for a long time, got left out, and it's like they have been overlooked and they're underappreciated.
They got 3 teams in the 12. They had 25% of the field.
Because, guys, he's like the CEO of whatever. He wants all of it. He wants all of it.
Like you said in baseball, we had 13. We should have had 14.
Yeah, he's never satisfied. And I understand that he's just doing his job, but at some point you're also like, yeah, you're also still Lord Voldemort, even though you're just doing your job. Like you're doing your job, but no part of you is going like, well, maybe we do have enough, and maybe we don't need everything of everything all the time. Yeah. Like you're still very successful. Everybody's making record-breaking profits, but you're like, you know what? We need to fire more people because we need like an extra $1,000 for everybody. You know what I mean? It's like that. He's trying to get as much as he possibly can, and the collateral damage to the rest of the ecosystem that he's not in charge of, I don't think it really matters to him. I think that's been blatantly clear, nor is it his job necessarily. I only have a problem with it when it's brought up by people that he is doing what's best for the game, and I think that's bullshit. And I've said that, and I'll continue to say that. I think he's doing his job, which is what's best for the SEC, and that's fine. But, I think that there's maybe a little bit of a sensitivity, but I also think there's a little bit of strong-arming going on. And like, hey, look, we play the best schedule. And he's planting that seed. And so at the end of the year, when everybody's like, well, should we take Auburn or should we take Texas Tech? Well, Auburn's strength of schedule is number 17 and Texas Tech is number 36. Yep. And so we're going to take so that they're already planting the seeds for the strength of schedule. That's why it's been such a hot topic. That's why they're putting out pamphlets today or papers or whatever. And so, yeah, that's going to come into play, especially when you have now 7 spots that are just open. They're open.
They're also being intellectually dishonest when they think.
Wait a minute, 7?
5
Oh,
plus.
you're talking about 14, right?
Or 4, yeah,
What
yeah.
12
So-
where they are. Eventually, it'll be 11.
So no,
Yeah, I was thinking about like this year's.
Yeah,
but-
I get it.
it's an intellectually dishonest argument if it's based on they feel they were screwed because of their strength of schedule last year. They were not screwed because of their strength of schedule last year. They were screwed because they failed to understand that losses to teams that are not good matter. So when you lose to Alabama by 20 or to Oklahoma, I'm sorry, by 21 points, when you lose to a 6-loss Vanderbilt team, as great as it was, when you lose to Kentucky, those things matter. So it wasn't the strength of schedule that hurt them. Like, they all had the quality wins. Their point is, we want you to pay attention to only the good things that happen to us and not the bad. And that is where it's an intellectually dishonest argument from the jump, because they are not admitting to why they didn't get all the teams in the playoff last year that they wanted. It was because the teams that were closest to it, and one of them, if Clemson doesn't make a last-second field goal, one of them's in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
South
that's
Carolina.
exactly right.
So
Yep.
again,
Yeah.
like,
Or Bama.
Yeah. So like, yeah, Bama's in. Bama would have made the playoff last year if Clemson didn't win that game. So again, there's consequences to losing to Oklahoma the second to last week of the regular season by 21 points in Oklahoma's worst season in 20 years. It is that you no longer get to control your destiny, and you have to worry about Clemson winning a game and knocking you out of the playoff.
Yeah, but it's
That's all
Oklahoma-
that was.
Yeah, they had one bad year with Venables, but it's been a quarter of a century since the year before they won it all in
Well,
2000.
it's a very political move.
Yeah.
Look at all the great things we do, and let's put a spotlight on that. And when bad things happen, it's not our fault.
Yeah.
It's the other side's fault. You know, like, that's basically the card they're playing. And you know what? There's a lot of people that fall for that and will continue to fall for that, and especially in SEC country, because they believe that. They believe that when a team loses, oh, well, they're still superior in some way. And I'm not anti-SEC, but that is kind of the way it's always established, of when you get into these conversations of, what, Big 12 is basically a G5 league anyways. That's what you run into almost immediately in some of these conversations. So there's already that perception and belief that, yeah, South Carolina might have multiple losses, but they're still better than the one-loss team in that other league.
Yeah.
And that's just what they've been conditioned to believe, and what they've been, I guess, in their own eyes, led to believe. And so you're never going to win that argument. But he's just pumping up those masses and pumping up that same train of thought of, we're superior. Even when things go wrong, we're still superior. And he's planting those seeds.